this is Barrie, a city constantly evolving. At any time, a whole host of pressures challenge the intricate tapestry of city government. In this series, we will explore the priorities deemed essential for progress, even if they don't always inspire unanimous applause. Join me each week for a candid conversation with a member of our city government as we uncover the stories behind the scenes of Barrie, a city on the move. Welcome to Barrie City on the Move. My name is Arif and it's my pleasure to be your host today. Whether you're receiving this content at home on cable or online on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. In this series, we look to explore the different relationships between government and the people, whether that's through legislation or operations, all with the goal of ensuring that the city delivers the greatest quality of life to its residents. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with two gentlemen who love what they do. They eat, sleep, live, breathe their work and their passion, and that passion is transit, moving people in this city. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Brent Forsyth, who is the Director of Transit and Parking Strategies, yes, and Jason Zimmerman, who is the Manager of Manager of Transit Operations. Thank you both for joining. I appreciate it. It's been about a year since we had our last conversation, and lots has happened. And just to sort of set the tone for today, we've got a couple of great announcements, a recent opening of the downtown transit terminal, but also some feedback on some of the service level changes, and I'm really looking forward to sort of getting into all of that. It is, and I think we should start here actually. I'm going to throw you off of the original plan because we are unscripted, but there's something really unique about the city of Barrie that makes it different and makes it a challenge that the two of you have decided to embrace and make it your life's mission. But just offline, we were talking about this story that you referenced, I think on a course, Jason, that you took, but why don't you tee it up just to give our audience a bit of an idea of what you've got going on in the back of your mind that may make this task, this challenge, different than anywhere else. Yeah, I mean, Barrie, as we all know, if we've lived in Barrie long enough, is sometimes difficult to get around. You know, it's got some pinch points with the highway. We go around a bay, you know. So, you know, I was just telling you earlier, I was at a transit planning course about 10 plus years ago. And I'm there with some of the biggest, brightest transit planning minds, you know, from around the world. And there's a guy there who planned like over 400 bus routes in Moscow, you know. And so at the beginning of the course, they're like, would one of the people in our course like to bring up, you know, a map of their city so we could use that you know, city as for our project, you know. And then they're like, oh, Barrie, why don't you bring up your map? It's a small city. We could probably work on that, you know. So I brought this map up. We put it on the table, and these, you know, brightest minds in transit planning stood there for a few minutes, and they looked at the map of Barrie, held their chins, and they're like, let's bring up a different city, you know, because yeah, it's a hard city. You know, we have, you know, a lot of roads. You know, we have an intersection with 5 roads, the 5 corners. You know, that's not common. You know, so we, you know, everything's kind of built around the city. Everything has these pinch points. So at times it can be a struggle to kind of make sure that we can get things around the city as quickly as and efficiently as possible. So when you describe the concept of, I mean, we understand 5 points, that's interesting and awkward, and somebody 150 years ago designed it, thought it would look beautiful. Yeah. But the use case was obviously quite different back then. But you also discussed pinch points. Give us an idea of what that means and how that impacts. Like, what are you thinking about when you're thinking about a pinch point? Well, obviously the highway. You know, we have, you know, what's unique about our city is that we have a highway that runs right basically through the middle of it, right? And there's only so many ways to get across it, you know. You know, recently with the addition of the Big Bay Harvey Bridge, you know, that's really helped like areas like Mapleview that were really congested before. Now buses can get through the Mapleview a little quicker, you know. But you know, with limited ways to get across the highway, and especially in the last few years, everyone that lives in our city knows, like they're reconstructing and rebuilding a lot of these bridges because they're pretty old.
And so, we've had a lot of struggles with our service, as well as like just getting my kids to their practices on time and that kind of thing, right? It's hard to get around these pinch points because all the traffic comes together to get under that highway at the same point, right? So working around these pinch points as well as around the bay, we've heard numerous times over the years, it takes me forever to get around the bay in Barrie, right? I've often joked like we need to get a hippo bus, and just go right through the bay, or build a bridge over the bay or something like that, right? But obviously those are kind of not realistic. So we're trying to always work on ways that we can get people up and around the bay quicker.
Well, never say never. We've got a premier who's willing to build tunnels. So there's bridges, tunnels, and now the hippo bus. Maybe someone will bring that to Queen's Park to get a grant for that. But interesting, actually, that you say that, because I was speaking with a different director level of a service in the city of Barrie, and they said that if they have to get from the northeast corner to the southeast corner, it's a minimum of 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a sneak preview. Let's pretend that they've got lights and sirens. It's still taking them 21 minutes to get there. And so now you're not necessarily a first responder, so to speak, but you're providing a service, and people need to move from where we've got a hospital in the northeast corner, and they may be living in the southeast corner. So just imagine that challenge to route that and get them there in an efficient amount of time as possible. We'll talk about some of the really interesting projects that you've worked on, probably coming up in the next segment. But as for big announcements, let's get into that. There's a project that recently was announced. I don't think at this point, by the time this goes to air, it's a big surprise to anybody, but there's the downtown Allendale waterfront transit terminal, and that was a project that was on the mind of council and probably members of your department yourselves for quite a number of years. For anybody who's not familiar with it, we had the downtown terminal, Maple?
Yes.
Maple, Maple, and between sort of Simcoe and Dunlop, situated there. And then you have a different level of service provider being the GO Train GO Train sort of over in Allendale. And there was always this disconnect that just didn't seem to make any sense. And finally, there's a council that not only knew that, but was able to find it in the budget and make it a priority and get other logistical elements in place to make it happen. And just this last month, I believe, was the announcement. Go ahead and give us some details on what went into that and what you're finding.
Yeah, fair enough. So it's probably actually been talked about for the better part of 15 years, but I would say what really kicked it off about 8 years ago, we got direction from council to do a feasibility study looking at moving the terminal from the downtown location to the Barrie Allendale location. And so basically what came out of that was a plan to do that. And then it was almost like perfect timing, because kind of shortly after that, the provincial and federal government released a stream of funding called the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Plan, which actually gave us gave the city the funds to be able to build this. And so the federal government funded about 33%, as well as the province, and then the city the other 33%. So it really made it that much more affordable for the city to build it. So 8 years feasibility study happened, then we got the funding. There was some other things along those years, like COVID, that kind of slowed a few things down. But they kept pushing through, and it has now been built at the location adjacent to the GO station, as you've said, which is really just going to help all of our residents connect to that GO. GO has plans of doing two-way service, in the future, and expanding there. So it's really just going to be kind of the gateway to, those coming from Toronto coming into Barrie, and also connecting to even further routes north on Ontario Northland if they're going north of the city. So
and you talk about that, and part of me thinks that everything does happen for a reason, as much as it may not happen on our timing and when we planned it. We've all seen what happens when a project gets undertaken and executed upon, maybe in haste, and then the things that we learned, I should have done it this way, or should have. That's not to excuse the fact that sometimes government moves at a very slow pace as well, and that has its own frustrations associated with it. But this is one that really the timing appears to have really worked out. Obviously, COVID gave it a bit of a reprieve, but with that two-way service and the work that needs to happen in order to make that possible, it seems to me like things are sort of working out at the right time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because now we're kind of at a point too where the next kind of focus on expanding that service and getting all of the municipalities along the go line together, and another stream of funding coming from the federal government through the Canadian Permanent Transit funding is starting to come. So it's perfect timing for us to be at the table with Metrolinx and hopefully getting more pieces of that pie, that funding pie that is about to come out.
So in just a minute, we're going to have a sneak peek of what it looks like in that terminal. But before we do that, just give us a bit of an idea of there's doing something on paper, mapping it out on paper, and sort of creating the ideal wish list, and then there's actually the live version of it once it's built. Give us an idea of what the user experience is like. Has it improved any one particular or more than one particular element of the user and ridership experience, or give us a bit of an insight into that.
So I mean, there's the new terminal has so many cool and innovative and great features that we just haven't had before. Like, for example, our platforms have digital platform maps that not only tell you the route that comes there, but what time that next bus is coming will be there. So it'll tell you down to the minute, down to 5 minutes coming, 3 minutes coming. They don't have to walk into the terminal necessarily and ask a staff member if they don't have a phone to be able to see it in live. We have heated shelters there, so they can wait outside right beside their platforms, whereas before you kind of would wait inside the facility and then walk out as it got closer, and potentially run the risk of missing your bus, which we never want that to happen. But there's cool little, there's great historical features too. As we know, that's the transportation, hub that has always been in Barrie, from rail to, 100 years ago to whatever. And they really acknowledged that with how they built the facility with some of the artwork and the heritage aspects. So I'm sure I'm missing some that Jay might be able to fill in.
Yeah, there's even they've added, one of the architect's idea was to add these bricks around the building with animals that are in the area, so, you'll see that, when walking around the terminal, there's the little bricks of animals, and you can, and there are 3 different languages, to the area that you have your Canadian, obvious, English, French, and then your Métis. So, there's the 3 languages. The artwork, the site itself used to be an old lawn bowling site way long time ago. So when you walk into the terminal there, you'll see artwork that illustrates the lawn bowling, and then old images up on the walls of the old, train station, things like that. So when you walk in there, you just you're immersed in this heritage of Barrie. And then when you're walking around the new terminal, it's just wow, Barrie has this, right? It's so nice. And the new shelters, the new maps inside the shelters, the electronic screens, it's just a new professional element to our city. And I like to say, like Brent mentioned, gateway, Barrie's always been the gateway to the north. Now we have the transit gateway to the north.
Absolutely.
And from that terminal, you can pretty much get anywhere. You just get there, you can take intercity buses, you can take GO trains down to Toronto, to the airport, whichever. You're going somewhere, you can get there from there.
So with that in mind, and we're going to go to the video right now, but keep in mind as you're watching the video that, as Jason mentioned, there is so much attention to detail that was put in it, and I will argue and challenge anybody to acknowledge when we've often gone through buildings in the last 20, 30 years that we've been built, Function, absolutely. There's been a lot of function, but they've also been very forgettable. They've almost been boring, for lack of a better word. Experience is very dry, very boring, not a lot of thought that goes into it. And when we go and visit other cities, when we go and visit other places, and you would imagine the same when people come and visit us, they are looking for something more than just a functional experience. And so this building really, as you'll see in the video, has taken that into consideration. I think it's beautiful. It also honors and pays respect to those who walk this land before us, which has been something that has been on our mind as a nation, I would say, for the last several years, and I think that it does that nicely. So we're going to go to break, but enjoy the video before we go to break. Enjoy the video. If you haven't had a chance to walk through the building, which I did recently, it's phenomenal, the quality of build and thought that went into it. And when we come back, we'll have more from Brent and Jason. We'll talk about the transit system on a more macro scale. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Take this opportunity to really outline what we're standing in today, and that's a partnership between the City of Barrie, the federal government, the provincial government, where all three levels are working together, and they've ensured that transit here is going to be done in a more efficient and effective way. Aligning with GO train station, obviously more centered in the geographic center of the City of Barrie, and on a site that's been used for transit for thousands of years. Not just in terms of what we know as the historic Allendale station, but before that by our First Nations and Indigenous partners. And so it's incredibly important that this be successful, that it continue, and obviously we align all of these services together today. I know Councillor Harris, you put a lot of time and effort into this, being on the bridge between both councils, so thank you for that. And let's make sure that as we're doing more infrastructure projects in the future, we have our federal friends, our provincial friends at the table with us, because I think that's what makes these things able to be done and so successful.
Welcome back to Barrie City on the Move. I'm having a great conversation with Brent and Jason. We're talking transit in the city of Barrie, and we were just covering the first segment. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you got an idea of what the look is, and I can't get enough of it, actually, just the amount of attention to detail and really the quality of the build that went into that is for the benefit of the user. And so there's obviously the architecture and the materials that went into it, but a lot of it obviously is the user experience itself that's sort of blended in and disguised into the layout and into the design and into the architecture. We started talking about some of the beautiful artistic elements, obviously, that it went into there, as well as the wayfinding elements, but there's functional elements that went into there. So why don't you give us a little bit more in terms of what the user experience can be like? What are some of the benefits of this new modern design that got really blended into a building that fits with the neighborhood that it's sitting in?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of, like, the terminal itself was built in kind of a welcoming, comfortable experience that if somebody is sitting there waiting for a train, because trains only come every hour or whatever they do, there's opportunities for tabletops to they can pull our laptop up and keep working, or in the future we are going to open a coffee style shop there, and so people will be able to get probably a coffee and a biscuit or something like that while they're waiting. Even to some of the technologies like the next bus arrival, we really wanted to make sure to get that message out there. So schedules are one thing, but having the ability to see when the next bus is coming. So we have TVs and monitors all over the terminal that are helping our riders with that. down to the accessibility features. We have tactile wayfinding throughout the entire property that helps those with the visually impaired that we didn't have at the previous location. So those are just some of some of the finer details that kind of went into it, and we thought of as we were kind of building this facility for transit users.
Well, hats off to council for actually following through in this. I remember working on the project to really get it going to do that feasibility study, and I'm thrilled that it's actually gone ahead. But the biggest thing for me is, and I'm not just talking about tourists, obviously we are a destination. We have big events on the waterfront several times a year throughout the summer and in the winter. So there's obviously a benefit to them, people coming off the go, but it's for those of us who may be using and wish they could use transit for their commute, whether it's as a tourist to go down to catch a ball game in Toronto, or having visitors come up, or college students traveling to and from university, during their journey. It just didn't make sense to me to have to take a $5, $10 cab ride from one terminal getting off the go to catch a city bus in the downtown terminal, or vice versa. So to me, that's just a huge benefit. Let's go beyond. Obviously, there's some integrations we talked about with intercity buses, municipal buses, intercity buses, the train. How's that working with, for example, the GO? Right now, I think the GO is still loading and unloading on Essa Road, but you've got an update on that?
Yeah, so starting late November, GO buses will actually begin coming into the platforms at the new Barrie Allendale Transit Terminal. So they had some scheduling items that they had to kind of figure out and sort out before they did that, and so they've sorted that out, and so now I believe it's November 22nd. Instead of residents having to walk out to Essa Road and board the GO bus, it will be in on the platform, which will just make for a much smoother connection with our service.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about sort of the system on a broader scale, but I think the logical next conversation is, well, what are we doing with the old terminal? What are we doing with the terminal that was serving the downtown? Are we losing all of that accessibility? Are we losing that function? Or what's actually happening there?
Well, downtown, we did build on Maple Avenue, just north of Simcoe, a small, I guess we call it like a mini hub. So we've got fully enclosable shelters there that are quite large. We have the information display screens there as well to give down-to-the-minute information to our riders when their buses arrive, as well as, it's all fully accessible, and it's still right in the downtown core. Adjacent to that, the old terminal, they're now in the process of working to build the STEM Hub, which is going to be the Lakehead University campus that the plan is for there to eventually have, students right adjacent to where a lot of buses are still going to come. So that's in the process. I know that they're planning to have that open by fall of 2026. So I mean, that's just going to be a really good synergy to the mini hub that we've built down there as well.
So there always was a goal, how can we get more hive of activity in the downtown, supporting local shop owners, restaurants, et cetera? How do we, obviously that's in line with the development for creating some more density in the downtown. I'm going to switch over to this topic of conversation, but there were people who were concerned, is our downtown walkable? Is our downtown inviting only during the day, or how about into the evenings? What about the bar crowd? All that kind of thing. And there was a lot of science and research and study looking at other municipalities or other areas that have how they've built livable downtowns, and the goal was, or the ideal recommendation was, give people something to do. Populate the downtown, but also program the downtown. So the STEM Hub, which is what, science, technology, engineering, math, something like that. I know that there's a big focus on mechatronics as well, which aligns well with the future growth, industrial growth of what this region is known for and becoming known for. So obviously you're going to get a fair amount of new population and vibrancy down there, but it's still services, I think is what you're saying, is that we're able to repurpose it for good use right there.
Yeah, it's still really well connected. So a lot of our bus routes that were servicing the north before still service the north as well as downtown just as much. When we did move to the new terminal, we made only really one major route adjustment, which was pretty minor actually in the grand scheme of things. So we have one route that is a very popular route amongst our riders, is Route 8, and it's actually a route that's 8, and it's in the pattern of an 8. So it runs like the figure 8 route, and so it used to cross at the downtown hub. So when we moved to the new terminal, we made the crossing point now at the new terminal. So, and I think as well, it just helps better connect so many neighborhoods directly to our new terminal. But when we did, also we added service onto Lakeshore. So now if you're in these neighborhoods that the Route 8 services, you have a direct bus to and from the beach. It used to run on Bradford Street before, which was still pretty close to the beach, but now you're right on the beach. So that's really going to help, especially in the summertime when we have a lot of people coming to the waterfront and there's limited parking. Now more people could choose transit as an option to, because you don't have to carry that cooler as far to the beach. So if you took transit, you could bring your cooler, short walk down to the beach.
And that might seem like a nice to have, but it's actually, in terms of the numbers, if you look at our beach this summer, it was packed. And obviously, yes, there are people who are coming into the community from other parts to use it, but a fair amount of local traffic as well. Let's talk about some of the enhancements, because I know that there's a bit of a pet peeve, and transit has been always picked on. Sometimes it was well earned maybe in the past, but you've taken that to heart. And again, offline, we had a conversation. This isn't just a job and a paycheck for you. You actually got pretty adamant about the performance of the system. Give us a bit of insight into sort of what your day looks like and why you actually do take this so seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that always hits hard to us, especially, is when we get feedback from our riders and say that we don't care. We care very much. And when we make service changes, our heart goes into it. We're giving away personal time with our families to be out there for that first bus of the day. And one thing we've learned when we make service changes and we put signs up everywhere, we communicate everywhere, nobody reads the signs. So please read the signs. But we can't always ensure that they're going to read those signs. So we're out there helping our riders face to face, because in some cases, and a lot of people just have a harder time being
with change,
informed
for example,
and being with change, right? And they have a hard time figuring it out, right? So, me, Brent, all our staff, we're always out there helping our riders because we do care. We
when
care
is the
very
first
much.
bus, by the way?
What's that?
You said that for the first bus.
The first bus would be about 5:15 a.m. On Maple.
Okay, so now time is actually flying on this. I don't know how that happened, but it actually seems to be going a little bit faster in this show. There's some other service changes that we made, and there are people who said, oh, you launched something about a year ago with Transit on Demand, but you also, the service also swapped out some larger buses for some smaller buses, and that got a little bit, people thinking about it sideways. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How is that going to change? It was a gamble. There was some math and science and research that went into it. Tell us what that program was all about.
Yeah, I mean, basically, one of the advantages with Transit on Demand is Transit on Demand can do a lot more in certain scenarios than a fixed bus route can do, right? So fixed bus routes can only go basically up and down the same road every 30 minutes. Transit on Demand can cover more area with the same bus, and Transit on Command is mainly beneficial for areas of low ridership or in areas that are newly developed without all the roads there yet to accommodate a fixed bus route. So we implemented Transit on Demand in areas where the ridership was really low, but we made sure that these zones that were being serviced by Transit on Demand still had direct connectivity to your major travel destinations, like transfer hubs, grocery stores, medical, that kind of thing. So you could still get where you needed to go directly by booking the bus through the app. It was a bit of a shock for some people that were used to just walking out and jumping on the bus at 8:45 a.m. because that's when my bus comes by and that's when I want it, and now you're asking me to book it, right? That was harder for some folks to adjust to. But we worked hand in hand with those people and made sure that they understood how to download the app, how to book their, the ones that struggled with it. And we tried to help them as much as we could. And now it's running quite smoothly. And essentially Transit on Demand helps us do more with the same. We're able to, as much as we may have changed some fixed routes into Transit on Demand, we now service more of the city.
So when we come back from the break, I want to get into a little bit more of that in terms of gauging my efficiency of the service and the usability of it. And I'm going to ask you to just think in your mind, maybe walk us through, for those who may not have used Transit on Demand, how can they access it, and how user-friendly is the system. So we'll come right back, but after the break, we'll be back with more from Brent and Jason talking about transit, the improvements, and also some projections into what might be coming down in the near future. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Barrie City on the Move, and Brent and Jason and I were talking transit. We've covered the brand new Allendale waterfront transit terminal, the impact that has made and will continue to make, and will be monitored. The connectivity with other types of transit, regional transit, and the train system there. What we're doing in the downtown, and now let's get more into more of the system-wide conversation. And before we went to the break, I kind of held you a little bit to the fire, basically saying people think you don't care. People think you're just dollars and cents, and if it's not in the budget, it's not going to work. And I know I appreciate the fact that you sort of took a position on that. Along with that includes sort of lessons learned. Decisions, sure, there are always going to be financial pressures, whether there's a funding envelope that no longer exists, whether there's a gas tax that's available or not available, but also budgetary pressures from council in order to, mitigate surging costs and price and fuel increased costs, et cetera. And you mentioned earlier, obviously, the challenge with any department, you're not being picked on, is how can we do more with the same amount or more with less dollars. But again, along with that includes the experiment. What do we know? Well, we know that the system isn't good the way it is, or isn't good enough the way it is, so we got to try something new. Sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you have a learning experience, as my teachers used to say to me. So what are some things that come to mind to you, Jason, as you're sort of looking at the operations, the planning, and the efficiency of the system from a rider's perspective?
Yeah, when we launched the Transit on Demand service here in Barrie in 2024, in June of 2024, initially, we're looking at data and textbook to make those decisions, and certain areas of the city, for example, the Edgeshell neighborhood, was really low ridership from the route that was servicing at the time. It definitely fit the parameters to become a Transit on Demand zone. So that was one of the areas that we had initially launched Transit on Demand and removed the fixed route. What we learned soon after launching is everyone was booking that bus just to and from downtown, back and forth, back and forth. That bus was just going back and forth, back and forth. And it wasn't getting back and forth fast enough, for the number of people. And then we also saw this increase in ridership. Some more students or other people were choosing to use transit. So we quickly learned that, okay, maybe Transit on Demand is not the best solution for that neighborhood. So from historical information that we have from that neighborhood, we know they want to go downtown, but we also know that they wanted to go down to Mapleview, Walmart, Park Place, things like that. So quickly looked at our routes, and we did a deep dive into the data, and we saw that we could connect it with a fixed route quite quickly to better accommodate those riders and put fixed route back in there. So it was one of the things we did. So essentially the lesson learned is that what maybe makes sense sometimes in the data and the textbook doesn't always work out practically, right? So when it got wheels on the ground, essentially, we saw that, this is a more difficult area because it is kind of a satellite neighborhood and it's out there kind of on the edge of the city limits. It's a more difficult area to service in that sense because of the travel patterns. So So not only did we accommodate that travel pattern with the route change, then we added to it. So now people in that neighborhood have a direct bus to downtown, as well as a direct bus now down to all the wonderful things in the south end of Barrie. So it was a lessons learned, but now we've learned from that. And then as we've grown Transit on Demand into all these new neighborhoods in the Salem and Hewitts, we've taken some of the lessons learned from that initial launch and made sure we didn't add too many stops to begin with. We put stops at key locations, key neighborhoods. We spaced them out accordingly, but we didn't want to put too much out there right away. And what we're hearing from these new neighborhoods is they really like transit and they want more of it. So it's a constant trying to keep catching up, because I think people coming into these new neighborhoods, they're coming from places where transit was a part of their life, and now they need it. So we're adding more stops. So we've had to add a few extra stops, mainly in the southwest initially. We had a church that went in on Salem Road, and it was in the middle of nowhere. In the past, there's no way we could have got transit there easily, because there's no development around it. We added Transit on Demand quickly there.
So before you get into that, because I do want to get into some of the growth areas as well, but what I found really interesting about what you said there is, and this is how I processed it, there was low ridership in that neighborhood, in the Edge Hill community in that neighborhood there. There was low ridership. So the question is why? Well, maybe the service wasn't meeting their needs. Maybe it wasn't available when they wanted it. Maybe it wasn't going where they wanted it. And you tried some things, and now you're seeing, not that many more units or houses have been built in that neighborhood, but now you're actually seeing a surge. You're seeing a demand for more. So more so than the lines on a map, sort of on a map view, is taking into consideration the demographic, taking into consideration the behavior or the patterns or the demands of what that community needs. Did I hear you say students as well in there, or?
Yeah, we heard from some of the staff with our contractor that there was some student housing that was in the area too that probably was a contributor to the increase in ridership.
Okay, so I do want to get into that, but before we went to break, I mentioned we would sort of talk about, if you haven't used Transit on Demand, give us an idea. So there's a number you can dial. I think there's a number that sits on the post where the sign is, but there's also some technology available to people. Yeah,
so through Google Play or the App Store in Apple, you can download the app. It's quick and easy. It's free, and it's Barrie TOD. Just type in Barrie TOD, and you'll quickly find it. You download it, and it's similar to like an Uber or any type of app like that, where you just put in your address, you book your trip. The other advantage that our app has for Transit on Demand is it will plan your full trip. So the trip planning application within the app, it takes into account Transit on Demand as well as fixed route. So whereas Google Maps is a great tool for planning transit around the city, it doesn't factor in Transit on Demand. So if you live in a Transit on Demand zone and you want to get across the city, you can plan it in that app. It'll tell you exactly what time to book your trip, to get what bus to get to the other end, so it helps you plan out your full trip with Transit on Demand. So there's that, and it's a very easy to use app, and we've seen really good uptake with people, but yeah, of course we have the ability for people still to call on the phone. They can talk to a customer service agent that can walk them through, book the trip for them, and help them if they don't use a phone.
Okay, awesome. That's fantastic. Now, I want to get, again, a little bit wider. We talked about, certainly with the transit terminal, we talked about the delays and how the COVID had an impact. But COVID must have actually had an impact on ridership in general. And that can mess with your numbers in terms of how you're forward planning for the right amount of resources, the right amount of scheduling, et cetera. And we're also now having a conversation where COVID is theoretically over. So we're seeing some new patterns emerge out of that, along with the fact that we're talking about the growth of the city, whether we're talking about existing built boundary, the annexation lands, but now we're talking about future annexation as well, and conversations to the south as well as to the north and east of us. And so how are you factoring for that? You touched on it. There's a faith-based community that acquired a piece of land on Mackay Road, for example. How does that all factor in, and what was their experience?
Yeah, we, on Salem, there's the church, and so we tied that in. And then just recently, last Monday, we tied in service down to veterans in Mackay, And that's a newly developed neighborhood. People are starting to move in. People need to get around. There's limited parking in that neighborhood, so people are needing to choose another mode of transportation to help them get around, and it's very remote. If I look at it on a map, I call that like New Barrie down there. It's down there. So we added the stops down there. We're already seeing a few people using it. And the great thing about that is they can take transit on demand, get to the express route, and get all the way to RVH if they needed to, in a quite reasonable amount of time, as well as they got direct connection to their rec center, groceries, that kind of thing. So it's starting out, it's working well. In the areas in Hewitt's where we're seeing high ridership, we're seeing those people booking to and from their GO trains, so I think they like that, where they can plan their ride essentially home from their train at their own schedule. Sometimes it's not as direct or as easy with fixed route, because you're only able to catch that bus at the time it's supposed to arrive. If your train's late or early or something along those lines, you can book your trip and help you get home, because everyone wants to get home at the end of the day.
Has the face of the rider changed over the year? You said 15 years you've been with the city, and we talk about obviously migration from the GTA here. Are you noticing some changes in the trends or the demographic or the pattern behavior of the rider?
Yeah, definitely. I was just taking the bus to our new terminal the other day, because now I can. It's almost as fast as a car, so I encourage you to try. And I was just looking around on the bus, and it's just more professional. You're starting to see more of these families choosing to make transit that second option, to get around the city. And so we're seeing more and more working professionals using the city. And I think, the new terminal is a good kind of recipe for that, so it's one of the ingredients to build that perfect recipe of making a service that people want to use. Clean buses, technology, nice new terminal, shelter at your stop if you need it. All those things, they help it make you want to use the service.
So when we come back from the break, I do want to talk to you about technology. Where are you getting your data? How are you mining your data? That type of thing, and then also get into other growing concerns. We're a growing city. We're on track to hit 250,000 people before too long. We're at about 160, 165 right now, I think. But who's going to use it? How frequently they use it? In terms of population density, in terms of congestion and traffic. When we get back in, I want to talk to you how you're analyzing your data. Who else are you working with? What other departments are you working with to plan in terms of moving people in an efficient manner, using the data, sharing information, planning the infrastructure as we continue to grow? So I just want to plant that seed with you, if you can think on it while we go to break. And when we come back, we'll also talk about transit safety. I don't know if, a lot of the other services, we recently had the chief of police on, and they deal with a lot of mental health calls. How is the transit system prepared and equipped to work with people who may experience a mental health breakdown, for example? So I'll leave you with those thoughts. I'll let you come up with any other topics because we're going into the final segment, give you an opportunity to also sort of deliver a message if you've got anything on your mind. So when we come back from the break, Brent and Jason will give us some insight in what we can expect in the future of transit in the city of Barrie. Stay with us. Welcome back to Barrie City on the Move, and we're talking transit with Jason Zimmerman and Brent Forsyth, and we've sort of gone down a bit of memory lane. Where were we before? What did we see needed to change? What are some major improvements and big stories that have unfolded over the last year in transit, with Transit on Demand and the opening of the waterfront terminal, the brand new state-of-the-art and beautiful waterfront terminal. But we're also talking ridership and what we've learned along the way, and what innovations and changes to adapt and work with the changes in ridership behavior, et cetera. We've been talking about that, and now we're going to get into how we use technology, as well as sort of forecasting plans for the future. So, a recent milestone, I would say, that was hit with ridership in Barrie was the 4 million rider mark. That's a testament. Now it's 4 million rides. right? It's not 4 million people using it, but it's
Correct.
4 million rides in a year, a pretty big accomplishment, a pretty big goal, obviously a testament to the fact that people are using it. And then, Jason, you had your story about Edgehill, obviously, where it was really low ridership, and with some changes and some mistakes and trial and error along the way, you've got increased demand and people really loving it. You've got another kind of a really good victory, and I likened it as we were on the break talking about, well, really just emulating driver behavior. And tell us about that story.
Well, in June of 2024, we launched the 400 Express route that was really designed to get people from the south end of Barrie to the north end of Barrie. And what I was talking about earlier is like getting around the bay in Barrie. It's hard, and if you live in one of those southeast neighborhoods, you're probably going to drive to the highway to get to the hospital, right? So that's your travel pattern. So now what we've seen, when we initially launched the 400 Express route, it was one of our lowest ridership routes, because it takes time for people to know that it's there, and build that base ridership and start to develop that travel pattern. Now it's one of our top 5 performing routes, and that's because people are learning, I can take the bus there and get up there a lot faster than if I was to take it through the city. So it's a really good news story because, and we're talking to seniors at seniors homes when we go for information sessions, and they're like, I take that express route, because I can park for free at Park Place, and then I can go for lunch after I get back from the hospital, and they go and they take that express route up to the hospital, they go to their appointments, they come back and they go for lunch at Park Place, they love it, right? So it's really changing the culture of people and how they travel in the city. So in some cases, they may incorporate the car as part of their travel. In other cases, they're taking the bus the whole way. But it's just really working well, and we're really happy about it.
So I'm glad you brought that case up, because I remember reading a testimonial from one of your riders, and it was about a lady who, I believe she was widowed, and that may or may not be relevant to the story, but she had to make several trips a month to RVH, and her ride was easily an hour and 45 minutes from the south end to RVH each way. I mean, that's a full day by the time she does her appointment and timing it, et cetera. And with this route, it cut it down to less than 45 minutes, I think she said.
Yeah, the first time when the express route launched, me and Brent went for its first inaugural ride. And we got up to RVH, and a nurse got on, and she had just finished working a 12-hour shift. And she was telling us, this is so great, because she lived down on Essa Road. And she's like, it used to take me an hour to get home after working 12 hours. Now I can be home in 15 minutes, so it's like a life changer for some of these folks, right? And that's where it's great to hear those good news stories, because often we don't hear a lot of the good news. Mm-hmm. We get a lot of the negative because, that's just what we do in public service. But, when we hear those good news stories, it just makes you feel good about some of the decisions we've made.
Absolutely. Well, and Brent, you work in parking strategy as well as in transit, and when you speak to Kathleen from Tourism Barrie, for example, she's a huge advocate for scraping data and working with cell phone tower data and all that kind of thing. Right. You're using something similar to understand the patterns and behaviors in transit riders.
Yeah, that's right. All of our buses come with automatic passenger counters. So basically counts when individuals are getting on and off the bus. And we know stop by stop throughout the city where that activity is. And so we use that data to help plan routes and plan future routes or plan infrastructure. If more people are, waiting at this stop than another stop, maybe they get a shelter, that stop gets a shelter first. So it's a tool that we've had now for, I guess, almost 10 years, and we're really able to kind of get into that and use that for the benefit of the system. And so the changes that we made in 2024 were partially built off of that, as well as the feedback and the other channels that we use when we do our route planning. But it's an amazing tool to have, and it really helps us make sound decisions.
What I think we were talking about again offline. Sorry to folks, there's an extra show that happens offline, but we were talking about the fact that before it was kind of like planning by gut instinct, yeah. And now you're actually able to use data, one of the benefits of data.
That's exactly right. It's, you're kind of planning blind before, and now, we have this data. We have, we meet with Kathleen. We have, some of her data too. We have data from, fare payment. We have an electronic fare payment now through a mobile app. Data is fantastic because it tells the story and it helps you build for the future. But then it also tracks some of that other stuff, like Jay talked about Edgehill neighborhood, where or now we've grown into the Salem and Hewitt's area with transit on demand. Like that data that we're going to get from those systems and that software will help us, decide, okay, well, when do we need to expand that further, or when do we need to transition from a TOD zone to a fixed route zone, and things like that. So we're always looking at that data and analyzing it to see where we can make tweaks or if we need to make tweaks. But on a larger scale, the city right now is doing a transportation master plan where it's really looking at how to move people around the city, both on transit, active transportation, and vehicles travel as well. And so they're going to start looking and taking a deeper dive into things like you see in York Region, like HOV lanes and things like that. In the future, as we're growing to 250,000 and stuff, what's that going to mean to the road network and what they're going to need to look at to move us around the city.
I might want to get into a bit of a speed round with you as we're rounding out the segment. But so you touched on that HOV lane, so it's on the horizon as a consideration.
Sure. Yeah, I think that will be considered as part of the transportation master plan. Again, not next year, probably even in 5 years, but the transportation master plan really looks out to 2051 when we see that significant growth. And what do we need to do today in terms of protecting roadways and things like that to make sure that we have the space or the infrastructure to be able to support those types of.
By protecting roadways, you mean future planning of future roadways, like that? Okay, so
correct.
Reserving some space for future growth.
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
Now with that in mind, though, sometimes there's a benefit to being the first mover, and sometimes there's a benefit to letting other people learning from their mistakes or their experiences. Electrification has been obviously a big topic. Maybe it's been trendy to some, but to others it's been about the environment, it's been about clean air, it's been all sorts of things. We've obviously seen some things in the news with EV plants being shut down, et cetera, but also the range, et cetera. What did you experience, and is it something that we're going to continue to invest in here?
Yeah, so a few years ago we got direction from council to buy a couple electric buses, which we're happy to say we received them earlier this year, and they've been in service for about 6 months. And we've been basically taking these two buses and running pilot scenarios on them where we're tracking loads on them in terms of the weight on them. We're tracking what routes they run on, and and things like that to get an idea of range and different things like that. And we're going to run that pilot for an entire year because we definitely in Barrie it gets a little cold here in the winter, so we're going to want to run those in the winter to see what the impact on range is. And then what will happen at that point is we'll report back to council probably next year with some of those findings and kind of the next steps on what that means for Barrie, whether we look at more investment in EVs or different vehicles if the technology advances in certain areas. We're always trying to be flexible and agile to whatever's coming out.
So we've looked at integration and cooperation with other agencies and service providers. We've looked at the use of the technology. We've looked at the different types of buses, whether they're large buses on a fixed route or smaller buses that are more nimble on a transit on demand scenario. I don't know if I got that perfect or if there's other scenarios in there as well. Using data to plan routes and forecast HOV, all sorts of things. Electrification. The one thing that we haven't talked about yet, obviously, is are you seeing any patterns for calls for service with regard to people who are either in the vulnerable sector or people who are experiencing mental health episode and sort of communication and safety around rider safety as well as operator safety? Yeah,
absolutely. There's safety is number one in our industry, and that is what we look at. But there's evolving technologies and processes and things like that are always happening. TTC is going through some testing right now of pedestrian identification software that helps the drivers identify if a pedestrian is about to run in front of a bus, and things like that. And so there's always these technologies, like I said, and advancements that are coming, and we're always watching for them too, because we want to build our system as safely as possible, and we always have our ear to the ground on that.
Excellent. Well, with that in mind, we've covered a lot of ground. We probably have to get you back. but I think it's also good to get you back to talk about sort of what have we learned as we continue to go through the process. So I really want to thank you both for making time, both of you, having both of you different perspectives, operations and planning and strategy as well, to come on and share with us and with the users. Obviously, if there's a takeaway, it's things continue to improve. If you haven't tried the system, try it, download the app, use it, etc. But Brent and Jason, thank you very much for your time today, and we'll see you again next time on Barrie City on the Move. Thanks for joining.